welcome everyone to today's presentation. We're calling it CTC Tools Demo Day for Civil Engineers. My name is Brian Levendowski. I am the Product Manager at CTC Software. We work in close partnership with ATG, and I will be doing the presentation today. I'm going to spend most of my time in Civil 3D, but I want to kick things off with a brief overview if you're not too familiar with the CTC Civil 3D tools. These are broken into two different suites of tools, two different packages. When I say packages, I mean you buy a license for the CIM Project Suite, or you buy a license for the CIM Manager Suite. It's one installer. Both of them come with a whole host of tools. What the CIM Project Suite is for daily users, daily production tools. It's, in a nutshell, it's about automating tedious tasks all across Civil 3D. And there's tools in there for pipes, for grading, corridors, sheet production, survey, you name it. We try to address every kind of shortcoming or gap in Civil 3D and make it easier or user-friendly for you to get your work done. So the CIM Manager Suite is for template and standards management. It, again, is about automating tedious tasks, but we're dealing with not production work. We're dealing with the back-end side of how Civil 3D and your templates behave, managing your layers, your styles, line types, description keys, you name it. That can be a very time-consuming process when you're perhaps doing an overhaul on a template, or maybe you have to build a new one for a new set of standards, or maybe you just never really got that work done that you meant 2 years ago, and now you're going to sit down and do it. The CIM Manager Suite really helps with a lot of that. So with that, we're going to jump into Civil 3D. CIM Project Suite is a ribbon that installs up here, a single tab and all the tools within it. The CIM Manager Suite is another tab that installs in your ribbon. It's as simple as that. Both suites come with some free tools. Those are the light colored buttons in here. And the other ones are free with a trial, but then come with paid licensing, both standalone and network, after if you wish to purchase them. But during the trial period, you can try out all the tools. So make it very easy for you to do so. So I'm going to start with pipes, and we kind of have this broken out into different categories, or maybe call it tool sets or disciplines. There's a pipes category, a survey, there's grading, corridors, labeling. Data Wizard is a tool set that helps with QTO and custom legends. And then Sheet Generator is a robust tool set that helps with plan and profile sheet creation. We're not going to be able to touch on every single tool, but I'm going to go through the key tools here and certainly mention some of the other ones along the way. This isn't meant necessarily to teach you every little thing about every tool, but to give you an exposure to what's possible with these tools and how they can save you time and allow you to work faster in Civil 3D. Let's jump into it. And as I mentioned before, as you guys have questions, write them in the thick of it, type them right into the system. I'll address them right then and there, unless perhaps I'm not understanding, or perhaps it's a very lengthy answer. But I'm going to jump into it here, and we'll go from there. Here's Pipe Planner. We can choose any pipe network in the drawing. Left grid, we get all the parts that are in that network. I can do very simple things like, let's grab all of our structures, and perhaps there's some simple renaming to do. This behaves much like Excel in that I can clipboard copy, I can press and drag things around. As I make those changes, it updates in the drawing. I hit OK to this. That's actually pushing it out to the drawing and renaming those parts. Okay, well, that's a very simple use of Pipe Planner. Let's look at structures, for example, or excuse me, pipes. I can go to the Pipes tab where I only work with pipes, or the Structures tab, or if I'm on All tab, it shows me all the parts that I have in consideration in the middle grid here. Now, if I go to the Pipe tab, I can work with these default properties here, but every other property that you might have in your parts exists over here. So what we do with them is, well, there's a myriad of options. Let's take a simple example again, simply swapping of some parts. The description is what ties to the part swapping in this tool. And if I just set a bunch of these parts to say 48-inch RCP, if I apply that in the background, that's going to swap parts from that 36-inch to that 48-inch RCP. And you saw these flip like that. But some of you might be thinking like, well, this is a big table. What can I do with this? Well, there's all sorts of things we can do with it. There's reporting options. Let's say we want a pipe depth report. I can grab, if I want my start and end invert elevations. And we actually have a custom component in here called pipe depth at interval. So it's going to quantify the lengths of pipe in my pipe network based on a certain range increment and a sample increment that I specify. And when I add this in here, it'll quantify all those pipes. Okay, so like this pipe right here, what portion of it is between 10 feet and 11 feet in depth, 11 and 12, so on and so forth. So it generates all that. Now all this information can be exported out to Excel. Maybe it's manhole schedules we're after. Let's go over here. Let's take our manholes. We can grab, maybe it's rim and sump elevation and perhaps pipe information as well. We can grab that. So pipe inner diameter and inner elevation for both pipe in and out. And again, it auto-generates the columns based on what is connected to those parts. I can take this, I can write it out to a new sheet or an existing sheet in a spreadsheet. I'm going to go and hit export on that, and we'll see that right out to Excel. There's that. All those structures. I had exported pipes as well and pushed all of those to the pipes tab. Now you can combine those on one tab if you want. Possibilities are endless in that way. Now, there's a lot of different workflows, and we've got a lot of detailed webcasts that show kind of more deep dives on that stuff. But one thing to point out is all these properties, everything can go to Excel. Now, I've mentioned reporting, but there's also analysis that we might want to do, right? Maybe we run our analysis in Excel and we want to simply sync that back. Okay, and once in Excel, we might change pipe sizes and so forth. Okay, and after you export that out, you simply run the import spreadsheet command. And just like I was editing in the in-app table, we can import a spreadsheet and it'll update all the parts in that way as well. So that's Pipe Planner in a nutshell. It'll read catchment data. So you can bring out runoff information for your analysis. And then the flexibility in building out those reports, that column order, you can put blank columns, empty columns in there, really kind of no limit to what you can do with that. So that's Pipe Planner, like I said, one of the new tools that just came out. We're going to be adding to it. We're always adding to our tools, and that one in particular. There's lots of other goodies we're going to add in there, but it's a very robust tool as it stands right now. Let me go back to Pipe Designer. Pipe Designer is about pipe run design. So I selected that pipe run down here in Profile. The first structure is right here, the one that I picked. The last one is down here. It cascades structure, pipe, in the order I chose. All the white columns are editable fields. So if I set a constant 1%, you might have noticed how these gray cells update. Okay, that's updating right in the kind of temporary memory of this application. If I apply this, we'll see that entire pipe run update at once. Think about how much time you would spend changing the slopes of all of those. All kinds of properties we can control. Invert drop, right? Of course, we want to be able to manage that. I'm working by matching inverts. We can match crowns. And when we do that, we have a crown matching factor. Perhaps I use 0.8. And that will control how small pipes going into large pipes match into one another. There's real detailed control. I can zoom around to different parts. I can change what I'm controlling here. So perhaps there's a fixed invert for this that I know of. Let's say it's 771. If I apply that, you'll see that structure down here, update. And then maybe I want to hold this invert and then figure out the slope between. Well, there's an interpolate slope function up here. I can choose 101 to 105, then click interpolate slope, and we'll update and calculate all those slopes. If I hit apply now, my whole pipe run will update. And it behaves as like one entity. Notice how it changed the slope from here to this structure, but because it's all connected in one pipe run, it also brought that whole, the second half of the pipe run down with it. What you're showing in your table here, you have lots of parameters you can turn off and on here. Vertical deflection, so this works great if you're doing water main design in pipe networks. We can show cover, we can highlight rule violations. If we've got rules turned on, I'm violating my max cover, stuff is way too deep there. We can apply rules. If I've got, say, default slopes, I can apply those rules like this. Maybe I didn't want to lock that down. Let's set that sump back to 0. Now, if I apply this, you'll see everything update over here in the profile view. And now I'm not violating that max cover anymore as well. So tons of control on this. That is Pipe Designer, another one of our common pipe tools. Let's move on. Let's talk about grading. Corridors are great for very linear type projects, roadways, railway, you name it. When it comes to residential or building sites, it becomes a bit more tricky. And we have tools like feature lines and the grading tools up here. These are really tricky, right? Because they're kind of buggy if you've ever tried using them. I shouldn't say kind of, they're very unstable. And then there's feature lines, which are pretty intuitive and relatively stable. And they're kind of the standard tool set used when it comes to site grading in Civil 3D. The problem with them is when we're talking about grading out some curb or a pond, we end up doing things like step offset just 100 times over and over to generate those additional feature lines for back a curb and so on. And so we've invented a tool that works with feature lines, but it does all of that kind of duplication and mass editing for you. And it's called AutoGrader. So for example, let's take this set of red feature lines and let's create a grading family. That's how this works. You create grading families. I'm going to create a parallel type grading family, and we're going to call this one curb. We're going to choose a set of parent feature lines. Those are like my baselines, my red feature lines out here. And I'm going to choose the layer they're on. So it's going to find, based on that layer, it's going to find 6 feature lines. Now those are my baselines. Now what do I want to do? I want to create 3D offsets from those. I can create as many as I want. I just create a grading child down here. I anchor it to the parent feature lines. And I can choose my parameters. Set a distance and slope. I want to do distance to relative elevation. I'll do a elevation of 0.5. This one is going to be the, say, the back of curb. We'll anchor it not to the parent feature line, but to the previous grading child. So each one of these rows is going to generate a feature line for each parent feature line that the grading family finds. And then let's do the lip of curb. And this one we're going to anchor to the parent because what? We want it to go to the other side. So the red lines that I have drawn are my gutter lines. And then from there, I'm going to generate 3 other feature lines for each and every parent. So we're talking 18 feature lines that we need to create here. And normally I'd manually step offset all that stuff one at a time. I've also got formatting controls, what style what layer is going to be applied to all of these newly created feature lines, what site will they go in. And finally, before I actually run this grading family, and you'll see all the feature lines created, I can also control which site it goes in, or excuse me, which surface the feature lines are added to, as well as what kind of supplementing factors to control the proper triangulation for the scale of my site. And all along the way, I get this preview. This was like a cross-sectional preview of what that thing will look like. It's schematic, right? It's not to scale, it's just giving you a visual. So if I run this, you'll see this update over here. All these feature lines generated based on those parent feature lines, and everything gets thrown into the same surface. Now it's pseudo-dynamic in this way, right? We're not going to generate those feature lines and be like, well, I'm done, right? There'll be changes we make. It could be elevation changes. It could just be geometry changes. If I just grab this and let's move this curve a little bit, that's my parent feature line, right? So AutoGrader remembers all this. It remembers those 6 parent feature lines. It remembers what to do with the child feature lines. I can run this again and everything will update, including the surface itself. So the time savings, not just on initial creation, but updating of your feature lines and managing them is huge when you're using this tool set. Now, it's just making standard stepped offsets. There's a lot of other strategies managing curb drops and ped ramp areas and all that kind of stuff. I don't have time to get in all of that. We've got some other detailed webcasts that show you those strategies. I just kind of want to give you the gist of it. And perhaps to give you a feel for how it works across your whole project, I've got a couple other families in here. Here's one for the pond. I've got a top of pond feature line, and in it I've got a number of grading children defined. It generates those stepped offsets for me, puts them in the same surface. I've got a grading site limits family in here. We can target surfaces, so sloping to surfaces. We can do distance to surface. Okay. So I've got a berm on the backside of my site here. I want to daylight into existing ground. I can even dive into that stuff and control things like how many vertices are generated along that resultant daylight or target feature line. Dial that detail in a little bit more. We'll see that triangulation and detail pick up here, right? So we get really nice, sharp feature lines in that way, as well as surfaces. So AutoGrader works great in this kind of 3D offsetting scenario, but there's other applications for it as well. I'm not going to go through in as much detail, but just to give you a sense of it in a residential scenario, I've got a few other grading families in there. There's different types of grading families. I created a parallel one where we have a blue parent feature line or set of feature lines, and then it will generate offset feature lines for me. We can also do perpendicular, where I have intersecting feature lines they're intersecting a parent feature line. And from this, I can insert elevation points along those lines. I also have template insertion where in my scenario here, we're going to be able to insert house pads. So what does this look like? I've got this right here. I've found 4 parent feature lines. Now these are the right-of-way feature lines. We're assuming that road grading has been done by a corridor or some other method. So we're at the stage where I'm moving on to lot grading. And I have an elevation at the front of the lot based on the right-of-way, but I need to grade, house front, house mid. You've got your own designs, but similar scenario. And I can have it force elevation points into these feature lines. So if I click run on this, this is actually affecting all these yellow lots right here. And it took all of these feature lines and it inserted elevation points in them. You can see the little blue grips there. It did that for all of these yellow lot lines. Now, in this case, I let the back of the lot tie into an existing feature line. That's the existing property line. And I'm just using some feature line style hierarchy to control that intersection right there. I can also grade or insert housing pads. I can reference a feature line template like this down here. And this is just one rectangle feature line, but it could be multiple ones, whatever shape. It's basically a template. What's my base point? And then how does that insert along that right-of-way line, including a detailed control on elevation considerations and so on. And if I run this family, it's going to insert those templates, dump them into the surface, okay? And everything, again, is dynamic. So parameters changed in here, things change in the right-of-way, will update. So if I just move that from 40 feet to 50 feet back and I run it again, all those housing pads will update, refresh in the surface. So you get an extremely powerful, kind of dynamic situation here. Now, some of your pads you might not want to automate in this way, maybe the one on the end here. Just use that standard ways you'd be generating a feature line and then dumping it on the surface. AutoGrader doesn't get in the way of any kind of standard feature line grading you might want to do. I can grab this, simply add it to the same site, or excuse me, the same surface, and get that same triangulation. But where all the detail is grading each one of these lot lines, inserting these house pads. Okay, so lots of time savings there. If you got questions, feel free to send those into the Zoom system and I'll address those as we go along here. But I'm going to jump along to another tool that has to do with grading. It's a tool we call Earthwork Processor. It deals with calculating complex earthwork volumes. And what I've got to start with in this drawing here, I've got a commercial site where I've got an existing and a proposed surface. And I want to understand my net earthwork based on different hold downs across my site. The cyan area is perhaps a 1.5 foot hold down. Maybe this is a 1 foot hold down or subgrade depth. And then maybe this is just kind of a sidewalk area that's 8 inches, something like that. So one question came in about grading transitions in AutoGrader. If we're talking about the parallel grading, like we had done over here, we can take advantage of feature line style hierarchy to control some transitions between, say, flat curb or full curb. Okay, there's a little bit more detail there, so I'll refer you to one of our other webcasts. But if one feature line set is to be at one scenario, and then it's supposed to say switch to another curb type, then I would just break that feature line, and you would have one family controlling that type of curb and another family controlling another type of curb. Currently, AutoGrader doesn't have a way where you program in, say, like, from this station to that station, transition from this to, a different slope or offset or something like that. But it's something we have on the roadmap. In the meantime, there's many strategies to kind of handle it now, though. Good question. If that didn't quite address it, you can feel free to type into the system again, and we'll continue to address those questions. So Earthwork Processor, I've got a finished grade, an existing surface, and then I've drawn some polylines that represent these different subgrade depth or different pavement types or hold down depths. And we've got a tool. I'm going to start off with kind of a little subcommand it has. One of the requirements with these different regions is that they're not overlapping. Yet when you're using, perhaps the boundary command or something, they might be overlapping. So we've got a handy little tool that will grab a whole set of polylines or feature lines. I can use like a layer filter, and it will I can do offsetting on it, just automated offsetting to everything. So if I hit OK on this, we're going to see it instilled a small little offset, so none of these polylines are overlapping, okay? Because these are going to be used as break lines and surfaces to generate ultimately our subgrade surface. And when you have break lines that are overlapping, the surface can only go to one elevation at a time. So let's launch Earthwork Processor. What I can do is create an earthwork set where I assign my finished grade surface and my existing. I can then use a filter or selection in the drawing to reference all the polylines that represent my different hold down areas. So here's those 4 polylines. They're being pulled into here. It's reading the layer. And then it's taking the current elevation of that polyline as the subgrade depth or the hold down depth. Now I can override it if I want here. But from here, this is all we need: existing, proposed, and some polylines. If I click run, what it's going to do is calculate cuts and fills for each one of those regions. If I want to assign some stripping depth, I can type that in for 1 or more regions, and the tool will account for that. Do we want labeling on this stuff? Okay, I can check on labeling and it'll insert mtext with all the relevant data in those labels. I can take this entire thing and I can export the results to Excel. I can dump it into an AutoCAD table if I wish. Okay, and so again, cuts and fills per region, and then it's giving us a total as well. Now, what's happening behind the scenes here is it's just standard surface creation. So to give you an idea, I want to show you the subgrade surface that I created. I've got an alignment running from south to north across the site. This end down here corresponds with this left side of this profile view to the right. So I'm going to add the newly created subgrade surface that the tool created. And I hit OK, and then that shows up down here. So this area right here corresponds to this cyan area here. That's that 1.5 foot hold down. Okay. Now, as finished grade changes, or if considerations of my hold down values change, for example, if this pushes to 2, right, that would affect volumes for that particular region. The tool automatically marks it out of date. I'm going to click run here. We'll see updates in here. It'll update my labels. And then if I close out of here, you're going to see the actual surface profile will update as well. That's going to drop down from 1.5 to 2 feet because I just set that. So same thing, if the finished grade changed, I just refresh that earthwork set and all the subgrade surface stuff will update, as well as all the volumes and cuts and fills themselves. So that is Earthwork Processor. Again, a lot of different strategies for using multiple earthwork sets in there. We've got some other webcasts that deep dive into that stuff some more. Let's talk corridors a bit. Corridor targeting in Civil 3D is often the most complex part, as well as time-consuming part of working with corridors. Yet it's still by far the best tool set when we're designing roads or anything of a linear nature. And so I want to show you a tool that totally changes how you handle corridor mapping. And somebody might be aware of a couple enhancements that Autodesk released for corridor targeting. I think when you give this tool a try, you're going to find it's a whole different game changer. So it works like this. Instead of assigning targets one at a time, picking things in the drawing for one subassembly at a time, we totally changed the whole idea around targeting. Instead of always thinking about each and every single object that I need to target, why can't I just say, for all of my boulevards, why can't they just reference dynamically? How about a style? Meaning every alignment that has a style called boulevard assigned to it, pull that in and assign that as a target to all of these boulevard subassemblies. And just like that, I can assign 4 targets to each and every one of these subassembly instances. I hit OK to this, all those targets will get assigned. Okay, let's go back in there. Let's do some more of that. I've got some other target objects in here. These green lines here, these represent the edge of my travelway. I've got turn lanes in here. I've got parking lanes. Okay, and I've got a lot of different lane subassembly instances that need to target that. I was on the Styles tab. I could continue to use that, or I could reference a particular layer. Let's go to the Styles tab and reference the offset style. And that's going to find 4 targets. If I hit OK to this, you're going to see all of those targets get pulled in automatically. Okay. Let's do one other thing. I've got conditional subassemblies to control when I've got driveways or no driveway. And I've got little polylines representing where each and every one of those driveways are to be created. Pretty common approach. Only thing is, it's a very target intensive operation. Let's go. I can find all those drop curb subassemblies, and I've just got things named in ways that make sense for me using all caps. Okay, here's that subassembly name, all kinds of other information about it. And then I can go, let's say, to the layer tab, and I've got all those polylines on a layer called drop curb. And then like that, I can pull in 24 targets automatically to all those subassembly instances. If I hit OK to this, we'll see all those targets assigned at once. And I've just got some hatching there to represent where that came in. Okay. So it's not just a quick target assignment, it's quick target updating too, right? And what do I mean by that? If I simply put, if I've got a few additional targets like this, and normally I got to go back in and assign those 2 new targets. But remember, what we're defining is not a list of targets, we're defining a set of layers and styles, and there's other options too, that are linked to subassemblies, so that if I refresh that target mapping through the auto map function, it automatically pulls in all those new targets. And then in this way, we'll see driveways come in right here. I didn't even have to go in and say, add these 2 new targets. It just found them automatically for me. Okay. So that's corridor mapper. A couple other things worth mentioning. I can link subassemblies, and notice I've been grabbing multiple subassemblies at once. We can't do that natively at all. I can grab a whole set of them at once and link them to any property. There's a 3rd tab over here where I can link by object names or object descriptions. And then under the reference column, I can also choose to mirror one set of subassemblies to another, say, parent subassembly, allowing you kind of to basically replicate targeting scenarios really fast. And there's also just a standard pick and drawing here, where if linking to layers or styles isn't making sense in a few situations, just pick it in the drawing and be done with it. And it always gives you a list of what targets are being pulled in that way. That is corridor mapper, real robust tool. Another corridor tool I want to mention here, a pair of tools, corridor splitter and merger. This works like a polyline break or join. Quite simply, I can choose a corridor and choose corridor splitter. And then from here, I can say, yeah, take this region, all these regions, and notice as I highlight them, they change to green. All of these are going to be in a separate corridor. And my scenario here is I need to split the corridor because it's going to be built in 2 different phases or what have you. It launches everything into here. We see all the baselines and regions of that original corridor, and then what 2 corridors it's going to dump into. I can use radio buttons at this point to toggle it back and forth. I can go back to the drawing. I can edit the name of the new corridor. Okay, lots of options there. It's going to split that corridor. It's going to keep all of its targets, all of its frequency settings in place. Now I've got one corridor here, another one here. I look over here. I've got 2 corridors, and then it also handles my surfaces. So the reverse is true. We can do a corridor merger, just the opposite of what I had shown you. So real powerful tool set that way. Let's talk sheet production a bit. We've been talking about manipulating pipes and feature lines and corridors in much faster ways, but what's our deliverable at the end of the day, right? We've got to annotate everything. And while there's a few areas that work okay in Civil 3D, a lot of areas are very time consuming. Take that grading plan we had started, right? Spot elevations are needed across all of these points here. Slope labels are needed. Let me give you a couple examples here. Using a tool called Label Genie, we can reference any number of drawings. I'm just going to use the current drawing, but we could browse extra drawings. And I'm going to choose to label surface spot elevations. Now, this is the label type. If you look in here, there's just about every label type you can think of. Regular M text, dimensions, section views, okay, everything in Civil 3D and AutoCAD labeling can be automated through here. And it's this same process. I'm going to show you one example, but there's quite literally hundreds of scenarios. So I'm going to do surface spots. I'm going to attach them to feature lines. And I'm going to use feature lines on this layer. And in fact, I don't want just that set of lot lines. I'm going to use lot lines asterisk. If I refresh this, then I know it grabs 122 feature lines. Okay, so every one of these side lot lines is what I'm going to attach my surface spot labels to. Now, what vertices do I want to connect them to? I've got control on all that here. We've got interval and midpoints as well. And then what surface is the elevation going to be read from, right? They're surface spot elevations, so they're ultimately linked to the surface. But where they insert in the first place, I can read all the vertices on these feature lines and then just tell it to insert there. I'm going to use this style, this marker style, do a rotation of 90 degrees relative to the object itself. So I want to have all these labels rotate relative to the lot line. I'll rotate the marker. Then I can induce a drag state on them if I want, but I'm just going to put it at 0. And I hit add. It's going to tell me what it's about to do, 479 labels. I'll say yes to proceed. And we can turn about an hour's worth of work into, what's that, about 5 seconds. And all those labels come in just like that, oriented to the lot line. Now I did a rotation of 90 degrees. Perhaps you want them in line with the object. Set it to 0 then. Run it again. Label Genie will update things, not just create things. So much like AutoGrader and Earthwork Processor, it's not just a creation tool, it's an editing or an updating tool as well. So if those grades change or the high point or low point moves, you just run Label Genie again. It'll move those labels around for you. Now you can save these labeling scenarios out to templates right up here. And I've got a bunch of templates I previously made. And so the way it works is if you save a few of these labeling scenarios, to your standards with your layers and styles, you don't have to. It's a pretty easy tool to use otherwise, but it gets even faster. Like let's choose surface slopes on the lot lines. We'll load this. I'm going to discard the changes. It's going to connect to those same lot lines. Okay, it set my style, everything for me. I'll click add here. 239 slope labels for every one of these segments in my lot lines. Okay. Things like detailed grading plans are very time consuming to annotate, right? I can automate like 95% of that work here. And they're just regular surface spot elevation labels. And if I were to put it in a drag state, and my style's not set there correctly, but if I put it in a drag state and I run Label Genie again, it's going to respect that drag state. It's not going to override that. Okay. So Label Genie, probably one of the most universal tools in the software, whatever project type, whether you're on design or survey, tons of things in here. Line and curve labels, right? If all these lot lines need to be labeled with segment labels, we can automate that. Tons of different stuff there. So a question came in here. Do the spot elevation labels pick up only the elevation from the surface? Or can the spot labels pick up elevations from the actual feature lines? These are spot elevation labels, which means they read from a surface. But keep in mind that with using these feature lines as the actual break lines in my surface, at a given vertex, the elevation of the surface as well as the feature line is exactly the same. So no, they are spot elevation labels, standard spot elevation labels. They have to read from a surface. That being said, you can label feature lines with line and curve labels, segment labels. And in those segment label styles, you can have it put elevation markers at each vertex. So yeah. Another question, does AutoGrader work with parcels? No, AutoGrader works with feature lines, just automating the creation of feature lines, the editing of feature lines. And can it produce a lot closure report? No, we don't have that built into the tool. Right now, we have on the roadmap a lot of different reporting tools. That is certainly one of the ones on the list, but AutoGrader is mostly about manipulating those feature lines themselves in an automated way. Good questions. Okay, I want to mention another tool here. I'm going to go through it briefly, and it works with plan and profile sheet creation. Now, if any of you have used the View Frames tool set, you'll know that it creates sheets. It does a decent job with it, right? But the problem is that when there's shifts in your project or changes in your projects, there's no way to make that change pushed to your layouts, right? When you create layouts, you're done with it. We've created a tool set that will not only automate the creation of your plan and profile sheets, which some of you might be doing manually right now anyway, but it also allows you to update everything, right? If there's a small alignment stationing shift, that could throw off your feature, or excuse me, your match lines throughout the length of the entire project. So I'm going to go through Sheet Generator. It's a fairly robust tool set, so I'm not going to talk on every feature, but I want to give you an appreciation of what it does. We're going to start with laying out our plan views. I can choose a station range, a distance between match lines, and it will lay out my plan views. Okay. You can run these again. If the starting station was wrong, I can run it again, and it just refreshes and updates behind me. Okay. I can choose different scales and it'll update. If I don't like the way a particular one landed, I can just move these around. All these are polylines and blocks. Okay. The red rectangle here is a block that comes from my sheet template. All that Sheet Generator requires is that you have a rectangular block on your sheet template with an insertion point over here, and then it does the rest. Let's talk plan view, or excuse me, profile views. We actually leverage, for the initial creation of the profile views, we leverage the native tool set. And then what we'd found is people want to be able to massage their profile views in many different ways. So I can use the Adjust Profiles tool, grab all these profile views at once, and then control things like stationing. Of course, we want to match the plan view stationing, but maybe I want some station overlap between one profile view to the next. And then what about the elevations? Make sure perhaps that the starting and ending elevation lands on a major elevation tick defined in my profile view style. Scan the objects within that profile view and center it on the median elevation, and then perhaps an overall profile view height. So I'm going to hit OK to this, and you're going to see all these profile views update and shift all at once based on what I've set here. see all those update accordingly. Okay. I actually created one extra profile view. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 plan views, and then I've got an extra one here. So because of it's kind of a modular tool set, right? You can jump around and kind of massage any point of it. Now, the last step before I create sheets is to place my profile views in their print blocks rather. And so all this is placing basically a rectangle around where those profile views will land in my sheet. That rectangle is based on this one, right, in my sheet template. From here, I can create my layouts. I've got the scale changed on my monitor for the presentation, so the tools are coming up, remembering the different monitor resolution. Anyway, I'm going to do plan and profile sheets. Here's all the station ranges between match lines for each layout I'm going to create. I'm going to rotate north arrows and insert match lines. And I'm going to do 10 layouts per new drawing. So this tool will create new drawings for you based on the current one you're running this in. And then we'll dump everything into a sheet set. I'm going to click finish, and behind us we'll see a new drawing created when we'll see those 8 layouts created for us. It's generating the viewports, it's rotating the viewports, it's rotating north arrows, it's inserting match lines, it's doing everything you might appreciate in that native tool set, but quite a bit more. And then finally it dumps it into Sheet Set Manager. I'm going to open one of these layouts and we'll see what it does here. I have the option for profile match lines turned on. You certainly don't need to do that, but the option's there. And then these match lines are actually attributed blocks. You can customize them to look any way you want. And they're inserted in paper space. So none of those kind of weird match line objects that aren't flexible or that kind of lose their linkage. These are standard objects that you know how they work. All right, let's make a shift, right? Let's say all of our plan views shifted because the project extents change. Let's go back to that 5450 for a starting stationing. I'm going to click next and finish, and it shifts all my sheets, right? It could have been a station change. Maybe I just needed to shift all the sheets. But if we look in here, right, my sheets, everything's out of place now, right? I've got to update my profile views. No problem. You just run through the same tool set, grab all those profile views, and adjust those to the new stations and elevation ranges. Make sure I reposition my profile views in my sheet again. That's what this next command is. Because the starting station of our profile views, we want those in line with the starting of our plan views. Okay, might have seen a little shift up here. This profile view is, notice that it's smaller in length, and that is so that it matches the plan view. And it also positions it within the sheet so that the starting station is vertically aligned. And then finally, I need to run the update layouts command. I've repositioned everything in model space. I just need to run update layouts, and we'll see how we can push all these model space changes back to all of our layouts, right? And this is kind of the crux of the tool right here, right? There's a giant shift in my project, or maybe there's only 5 sheets, whatever the case is, right? Redoing those sheets, recutting them, or manually moving those viewports. Big time consumer it is. So here it's telling me, here's all the new station ranges, my new match line station ranges, and here's the layouts it's going to basically push that new configuration to. Now you've got little drop downs here, you can override it if you want, but it's also going to update everything in my sheet set. So I'm going to click finish, and it does, again, probably an hour's worth of work in about 5 seconds. It's updating all of these layouts, the viewports, the match lines, okay, the match line stationing, as well as all the parameters inside my sheet set itself. Okay, so that is Sheet Creator, really robust tool set. You know, once you guys, you know, if you have a need for plan and profile sheets and you're doing any more than 5 or 6 sheets in a row, you're going to have a great time with that tool set. All right, let's talk a little bit on the CIM Manager suite. I'd covered mostly the CIM Project Suite. That is our flagship suite of tools. It's the daily production tools, but we also have the CIM Manager suite. Let's talk line types a little bit. Line type editing in Civil 3D, or AutoCAD for that matter, is working in a text-based file in Notepad Editor. We can instead load that thing right into here, and I get a visual of the actual line type right down here. This is a plot, basically what it would look like if it plotted. Okay, it's not just a previewer. More importantly, it's an editor too. So I can create new line types right in here, and I don't even have to know the syntax of line types, right? I can come in here. Let's say I don't like the spacing around the word gas. So there's a space component right before it. Come up here and say, well, let's change it to 0.15 instead of 0.2. Tab out of that and the preview updates. There's a space component after the text. I can change that, let's say to 0.23, and that updates. As simple as that. You can add new text components, new shape components, anything and everything you can do in a lin file, you can do here. We just make it foolproof for you, and you get a constant up-to-date visual while you're doing it. You can import line types from the drawing if you've got objects, line types you want. You can add them to the drawing. One question that came in, the scale in Line Type Manager does not seem to have a 40 scale. Yeah, we put some default scales in here. There's 10, 20, and not 30 or 40. It does not have a 40 right now. I have it on the list. We're going to get some other scales added in there. I realize that's kind of a gap, so yeah. But you can, as you move this around, the preview basically gets bigger, so you'll be able to kind of still get a decent visual on your line type. But yeah, we're going to get a few more scales added in there in an upcoming release. All right, let's talk another tool set. And by the way, all of this stuff saves back to the lin file, standard lin file. That tool is free, by the way. So even if you don't buy the CIM Manager suite, that's a no-brainer. You know, no point in messing around with lin files when you can just do it visually in there. Let's talk about one of the most kind of difficult parts in Civil 3D template management, which is understanding where layers are used, where text styles are used. There's no way to do it, and you end up searching for this stuff through all your Civil 3D styles. We have a simple tool that will search for, starting off with layers, for example. For example, the C Table pattern layer is used in about 25 different styles. It tells me where they all are, and I can, right off the bat, I can swap out all of those layer references. I can then delete that layer. Okay, let me repeat that. It finds all the references to a layer, allows you to change it, and then of course, simple delete layer button. That could have been an hour of work. I can do it in about 5 seconds. Now there's other areas. What about text styles, right? You ever have text styles that you can't delete out of your drawing and you have no idea where they're being used and you just kind of deal with it? Well, here's one. There's a whole bunch of block references to this text style. I can just swap that out, say, you know, use the standard one. That jumped into each block definition, removed SHR and swapped it with standard. And now I can actually get rid of that pesky text style. That is Template Tracker, really cool tool. I want to show you one last tool, and then we'll wrap things up, and I'll hang around as long as you guys want for any questions that you might have. We're going to talk about layers. I'm going to export my entire layer manager to Excel. And the reason we might want to do this is why? because this layer manager is pretty tricky to work with, right? So I can export all the properties, all the definitions, like the line type, the line weights, you name it. I can export it out to an Excel file in this way. And then I can work in Excel, and then I can sync it back. I'm going to show you the process with just the layer manager, but we can do the exact same thing with all 4 major, let's call it table type interfaces for your standards. The layer manager, the description key sets, the object layer settings, and the figure prefix database. So what I'm about to show you here applies to all 4 of them, and that kind of sums up these other tool sets in the CIM Manager suite. I had this weird thing lately where my browse or like file open or file save window is just really slow, and this is hanging up right now. Doesn't matter what application I'm using, it just drags out like this. So as I'm waiting for this, if you guys have questions on anything that we've covered so far, please submit it in the system, and we will address those. So I'm going to save this out to a layer properties file, if I can. Again, while that's waiting, the stuff I covered is across those 2 suites. It's those 2 packages, the CIM Project Suite, the CIM Manager Suite. They come individually licensed. Most organizations, right, they have a lot of the CIM Project Suites because those are daily production tools. The CIM Manager Suite, you might have just 1 or a couple licenses, just for those few people who are doing that CAD management. And here's my whole layer manager exported into Excel. And it's what I call a real smart export, because like here's all my plot styles exported. My line types are exported, okay? We put a unique column in here called the new layer column. And because we're working in Excel, it doesn't really know that these are layers or where they're being referenced, right? So let's say I wanted to change layering standards. Think about renaming a whole bunch of layers, right? A big pain in the rear. I can instead just come in here, let's say, replace V dash with EX dash. Replace all, okay? And the point here is that this is the new layer name for this old layer. So when I sync this back to Civil 3D, and by the way, this works in plain AutoCAD as well, we'll see those changes push, and all the references to those layers will stay in place. Save that, we'll come back to AutoCAD, cancel out of here. I'm going to go to the Create Edit DWG Layers command. I'm going to drop in my path here. That's the Excel file I just exported. I'm going to sync to drawing layers. I'm going to hit Next. It's going to scan the Excel sheet. It's going to scan everything in the drawing. And it's going to find that there's a whole bunch of updated layers here. Okay. Now it would tell you which ones were deleted and all sorts of things. Nice little legend down here. I'm going to hit OK to this. And if I look at my layer manager, we'll see all of those layers changed in that way, right? And it didn't just kind of pull them all out of there, right? It made sure that all the references to those old layer names were still in place, right? So like if I look in my point style, now everything is EX, okay? The amount of work to do all that, it's a ton of time to make that happen. So we're after speeding that up. So thanks everyone for hanging out, for staying a couple minutes late. Any other questions you have? I'll hang out here until we get them all addressed. But as always, thanks for hanging out. This is recorded. We will get it posted, notify you guys of the recording in the very near future here. So if you need to get going, thanks again for attending, and have yourself a great day. Yeah, a question came in about licensing. I'll explain it briefly here. There's standalone licensing and there's network licensing. Standalone locks to a certain computer. Network licensing is floating licensing. So if you have 5 network licenses, you can only have 5 users at a given time, but you could install the tools on 30 different computers. So long as more than 5 people don't use it at once, you're good. And there's another thing to mention about it. As soon as you close out of a tool, it releases that network license. Unlike a lot of other AutoCAD and Civil 3D plugins where it holds onto the license until you close down Civil 3D entirely, this releases the license right away. So it's very economical licensing in that way. Another question about if we upgrade a RAM or hard drive on a standalone license, will it work? It depends. The standalone licensing is linked to hardware IP addresses, I believe. I can't tell you exactly which one it is because I don't know. But there are multiple activations. So we account for people perhaps getting a new hard drive or something like that. If you've run out of activations because you've got a new computer, change your hard drive, and you can't activate it, contact us and we'll make sure to get you another activation. Yeah, good questions. So with that, I don't see any other questions coming in. Thanks everyone for hanging out. You have yourself a wonderful day and rest of your week, and we will see you next time.